So we'll get started right now, and this is Joe Lynch. Joe Lynch was a two-time bantamweight champion of the world. This honor would never have happened had it not been for the research of Jerry Kleiman, who's here tonight. With us this evening and is grandniece Gail Zara and her family, along with grandnephews John and Jerry Lynch. They're at this table. And we also have the support, which we thank of the New City Fire Department, which is here as well, some fire folks. So thank you so much for coming out. So to get started, Jerry Kleiman will discuss Joe Lynch's extraordinary boxing career and life in New City. So Jerry.
Does this work? Do I have to hold the microphone?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you to the board for inviting me to speak about Joe. I'd like to welcome his nieces, nephews, and family. It's nice to see some of the descendants. After reading about him for years, we're getting close to the real thing, and it's pretty exciting for me to see you guys. And I'd like to thank everybody else for attending today. My name is Jerome Kleiman. People call me Jerry. And a year ago, I wrote an article about Joe Lynch that appeared in a column that I have in the Rockland County Times. It's called Our Forgotten But Notable Neighbors. And at the time, it would have been hard for me to imagine that I would be speaking to you today to induct Joe into the Hall of Fame. But what happened was that was the first article that I had written for the Rockland County Times, and I had a feeling that nobody noticed it. And then I found out that a fellow named Jamie Kempton had read it, and he contacted me. Somebody reads newspapers. And coincidentally, he was a sports writer for the local newspaper that I used to follow for years. So knowing that he paid attention to my article was very complimentary. But he got in touch with Pete Scheibner and told him about Joe Lynch. And I guess neither of her had heard about Joe Lynch before. And they say, whoa, this is something that right up our alley. And here you are today. And for me, it was very fulfilling. To write an article today, nobody reads newspapers anymore. And it sort of encouraged me to continue writing, and I've continued to write another 10 articles about people like Joe Lynch that pretty much have been forgotten. So the situation was that I had decided that I wanted to write about Joe Lynch. I knew about him. I had always been interested in boxing as a kid. I'm not a kid anymore. I was a kid a long time ago when people like Joe Lynch were still sort of discussed. I used to read Grant Lynn Rice and people like that, great sports writers. And the name Joe Lynch came up. It was a bantamweight. And in the 60s and so on, people really didn't pay that much attention to bantamweights. They were too scrawny, too little, and there weren't too many Americans that weighed 118 pounds anymore. But in the 1920s and 19-teens, people weren't so big. I don't know if they could go to the supermarket and buy as much food. So they were pretty skinny, and there were a lot of American bantamweights. And actually, people loved to watch the bantamweight fighters more than the heavyweights at that time, except for a fellow named Jack Dempsey. I guess you might have heard of him. Anybody ever hear of Jack Dempsey? Okay. So Joe Lynch was part of the era, the great golden age of boxing when Jack Dempsey was a champion. And when Jack Dempsey was the heavyweight champion of the world, Joe Lynch was the bantamweight champion of the world. And people all over the world, and I'm not just talking about locally and so on, they would follow boxing. It was in the newspapers every day. So if Joe Lynch would have a fight, people in British Columbia and Melbourne, Australia would know about it. But when I was talking to people about Joe Lynch, I found out that he actually had worked over in New City as a postmaster. I said, wow, you know, there's something here. I asked people in the neighborhood, nobody knew who he was. So that sort of encouraged me. I said, okay, this is a guy that people have to know about. Now, I'm not going to get too much into the weeds about Joe's career. If you want to read more about it, there's quite a bit in the journal that you have in front of you. But he had over 160 fights, professional fights, that are listed, okay? He probably had a lot more. I know that in an interview he said he had between 200 and 300 fights. Now, a few little details about that. He had never been knocked out. Okay, never been counted out to the count of 10, never was TKO'd with a cut, or never had to have a referee intervene to rescue him. So that's very rare. Even in today's age, when people fight 30 fights, 40 fights, and they call it a career, he was fighting five times as many fights. He was fighting the best fighters in the world, and he never got knocked out. So I don't know if it runs in the family in the Lynches. Anybody over there get knocked out lately? Not lately. Okay. All right. All right. We'll see later if you can take a punch. So, on the other hand, although he could take a punch, he could also give a punch, and he was considered one of the greatest knockout fighters in the bantamweight division. Now, I don't know if I mentioned it, but bantamweight is 118 pounds. All right, so that's sort of, you know, you don't look at those people as being very dangerous, but he could take you out with one punch. Joe was brought up on the West 47th Street, on the west side of Manhattan, in an area that's known as Hell's Kitchen, a neighborhood. He was a scrawny Irish kid, and in those days, the beginning of the 20th century, he had very few choices. It was either fight or run or get your butt kicked. And he fought, and I don't think he got his butt kicked too much. And then when he learned realized that you could make money by fighting, he became a professional boxer at the age of 18. In 1916 it was, okay? And right away he was fighting 10-round fights. So he didn't start out with the 4 rounds, 6 rounds, 8 rounds. They put him against very good fighters, and he held his own. But he was also from a very good family, and he would discuss this quite often. He would help his father. They had a moving business. Even when he was a champion, he would work on the truck with his dad. He went to commercial high school at a time when going to high school was a pretty big deal. And this would serve him well later on in his life. He was good friends with Jack Dempsey, Tex Rickard, people like that. I don't know if any of you know about the history, but those are people that, Tex Rickard, for example, it was the promoter at Madison Square Garden. So if any of you have heard of the New York Rangers hockey team, okay, that's a little bit of a rhetorical question. So, but do you know why they're called the Rangers? I mean, they're not from Dallas, are they? So the reason why is that the hockey team was originally called Texas Rangers, named after Tex Rickard, and then eventually they called the team the New York Rangers. So, I mean, he was a big deal. He made boxing what it was and what it is. It took Joe 4 years to become the champion, 4 years of campaigning. And the only reason why I think it took him so long was that there was a little event that threw him off his trajectory, and that's known as World War I. In World War I, he joined the Army. He was in the combat engineers fighting in France. And then he came back, he got married, he continued his career as a boxer. Joe was 5'8" tall and 118 pounds. People called him the human xylophone because, because you could see his ribs bursting through his skin. And, you know, Irish people sometimes have very, very light skin, so, I mean, you could basically see his ribs. And he fought very intelligently. He had a long reach. Most of the people that he would fight would be 5'2", 5'4", and he was 5'8", so he was like a real stream bean. But he had tremendous torque, tremendous power, and he was able to beat the best men in his division. He finally won the championship in 1920 on December 22nd. He won a 15-round decision in Madison Square Garden against a fellow named Pete Herman, who was the champion at the time. And just to show you what type of guy Joe Lynch was, he fought 14 of the 15 rounds with a broken left thumb. So he didn't quit, he just kept fighting, and he won a very clear decision. However, about a year later, he lost the decision to Herman in a rematch at Ebbets Field, where the Brooklyn Dodgers would play. And a little over a year after that, he won back the championship and held on to it for 2 years until 1924. He lost to a fellow named Abe Goldstein. And by that time, Joe was having problems making weight. So now he was probably walking around weight, probably 130 pounds. He was just what happens to all of us. He was expanding. And he was able to go into the steam room, and he got down to 118 pounds when he fought Goldstein, but he was basically depleted. So he fought, actually, there was something called the junior featherweight. It was 122 pounds. He fought this fellow, and unfortunately he lost. And by that time, his career was winding down. Now, you may ask, well, why would he come up to New City, of all places in the world? In 1920, it was a farming community. He probably didn't know what a farm looked like. He didn't know a carrot from a tomato. And, you know, suddenly winds up in New City, and that's it. So here's the story that he tells. When he lost to Pete Herman at Ebbets Field, he earned $37,500. That's a pretty big hunk of change in 1922, right? I don't know, was it like 20 or 40 or 50 to 1? Okay, so that would be one fight. Now, that was the purse for the whole, okay, and has to split it with his manager and so on and so forth. And then basically the manager gets the money, I guess. He went to his manager, a fellow named Eddie Mead, and he said, okay, you know, there's the money. And then he said, oh, we got a little bit of a problem, Joe. I said, what's going on? He said, I bought you a farm. What? He said, yeah, somebody offered a farm, and I thought it would be a great idea for you in a place called New City, and now you own a farm, but you don't get the money. And Joe realized at the time that the deal was done. He couldn't get the money back. I guess he felt that he could kill Eddie Mead, but he decided that he didn't want to go to jail for the rest of his life. So instead, he came up to New City. And he realized that it wasn't such a bad place after all. So he had approximately 70 acres where the Seine building is, right off of New Hempstead Road by the county offices and whatever. And years later, he said that that was the best thing that ever happened to him, aside from marrying his wife. I think she was probably with him at the time that he said that, so you know how it is. You're all married. And he spent the next 40 years there until he passed away in 1965. But he did not, now Joe Lynch at the time retired, right? He retired. I guess a lot of you are retired. And when you think of retirement, you think of, okay, 65 years old and whatever, Social Security. No, Joe Lynch was retired. He was 28 years old. So he had a lot of energy, but he was out of his profession, the boxing profession. So he kept busy. He was a very good citizen. He was the ideal citizen, you might say. So what did he do? He became what was known as the foreman of the fire department, later to be known as the chief. He was known as the fighting fire chief. There's a story that's told, I don't know if it's apocryphal, I don't know if it's true, but they said that, they used to hang out in the fire departments waiting for the fires to happen. In those days, the buildings were made out of wood, so maybe there were a little bit more fires than today. So they were on call, they were hanging around playing pinochle, and then some younger guy, I don't know exactly what Joe's age was, but some younger guy started to kibitz with him and give him a hard time. And then apparently the guy got a little bit aggressive. So Joe excused himself from the pinochle game, turned around, gave the guy one punch, flattened him, and then sat down and continued playing pinochle. So that was not a very good idea to mess with Joe, even if he was a little bit older. Among other things, Joe would, together with George M. Cohan, he would own the Elm Hotel, which was across the street from the courthouse on Main Street in New City. He was the president of the New City Democrat Club and the vice president of the County Democrat Club. At one time, he ran for state assembly but lost. He was also a deputy sheriff, and he continued to be involved in boxing in the county as a referee, and he would work with younger kids. He was also the postmaster of Rockland County, of New City, and he was a close friend with Big Jim Farley, who was the Postmaster General of the United States during one of the terms of FDR. And Jim appointed him, Joe, as the postmaster. It was a position that he held for quite a long time. And now that you know a little bit about Joe Lynch, if you want more information about more details about his fights and et cetera and so forth, there's a lot of information, as I said, in the journal today. And in conclusion, I just want to say that I want to express my gratitude for Jamie for reading my article. And my articles come out once in a while, so maybe you should all read them once. Okay, the other thing is that I want to thank Pete for his diligence and hard work. Okay. Besides that, I want to express my gratitude for all of you coming here today to underscore the fact that Joseph Aloysius Lynch, alias Joe Lynch, is no longer a forgotten neighbor, and that he is getting his due recognition as a great athlete by the people that, if he were still alive today, he would call all of you his neighbors. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. If I could get the Lynch family up here, please. We have a plaque to distribute to you. You're All right, we want John to say a few words as well for Joe Lynch, please.
Hey everybody, I'm John. I'm Joe Lynch's grandnephew. I want to thank those of you who like rediscovered our we just call him Uncle Joe. He was the pride and joy of North New City, my Joe Country Club. Every little kid in the neighborhood would come, they'd want a box. We had that photo on our wall. There was the very first diamond gold buckle that was given out that disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Probably wasn't, never mind. Our dad had something to do with that. Just this, what was read about Uncle Joe, I've kind of known only because he was my hero. When I moved into New York City, I left Rockland in 1980. I moved into New York with my older brother. I went to an Irish pub, the White Horse Tavern, a very well-famous bar. And when I bought the beers for the North baseball team and turned around, there was Uncle Joe. And I walked over and I kissed it, and I got in a shootload of trouble. And I never had to buy a beer in an Irish pub again because Uncle Joe was everywhere. The Irish loved him. Really, the only story you don't know is he bought the buildings where he met Anna. It became Joe Lynch Housing on 47th Street. And he was known that on rent day, if a single mother didn't have money, he would give what was called milk and cheese money to her. And I think that's what every parent wants their kid to be like. So he's our uncle. It warmed our hearts when I got the text from my sister, from Peter. I'm like, how the heck did they discover Uncle Joe in the article? So the fact that his name has been, Joe Aloysius Lynch has been mentioned a lot tonight is like really super cool. So for my family and my friends from Crosstown North, I'd like to say thank you.